This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week, talking about something that I know affects a lot of you out there who are listening, and that is imposter syndrome. And maybe you don't know it by that name, but I'm sure you have felt a lot of the feelings that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about, really what it is, how you can overcome it. And to do that, I am joined by author, media trainer, and marketing strategist, Susan Harrow. Thanks for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here with you and your audience, your people.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself and why we're talking about this week.
So I'm a media trainer and martial artist and marketing strategist. And really, I got interested in martial arts specifically because I wanted the embodiment of being able to present yourself in PR situations. So in media appearances, in podcasts, in presentations, in any kind of meeting, to really have that embodied in your body, not just in your mind, and to get, because a lot of the practices that get into your mental and muscle memory are before you actually get into the situation, which includes role play and practicing an iteration. And I really love the idea of, when we talk about the 10,000, what is it, the 10,000 iterations that like Malcolm Gladwell was talking about? It's really about those 10,000 and tweaking each time to start to shift whatever's happening. So that happens with all of us in our experience, whatever it is. Where I was a teaching tennis pro, I'm a black belt in Aikido. So some of those practices, and I grew up playing, I was just talking to my friend, I grew up playing classical piano, an hour a day practicing no matter what. So those kinds of things I think are super important to move toward excellence. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, we're talking about imposter syndrome specifically, and I want to come back to, what you talked about martial arts, because that's a very interesting connection to me, at least, because I'm not as familiar with, the entire world of martial arts. But to start off, kind of explain what imposter syndrome is.
I was listening to a story about the Dalai Lama when he actually had a meeting of psychologists and meditators and teachers and yoginis. And they asked him the question, how should we deal with self-hate? And the Dalai Lama didn't even understand that translation. His translator was trying to explain it to him. He didn't get it. And then someone finally got to him and explained what self-hate was, and he was baffled. And I really think that imposter syndrome is ultimately a self-hate. And if we look at it, and I think that right now it's been glorified. So what is it? It starts with its self-doubt and believing that, we can't do it, or we're a fraud, or whatever it is that we feel competent at, that we're going to be unmasked and, stripped naked, and people are going to discover that we aren't who we really have presented ourselves to be. I mean, that's really it. Yeah. And it's an epidemic.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's ironic because like a lot of people use the term "fake it till you make it," and then
I don't believe in that.
Right, and then I think a lot of people live by that, and then they get to the point where they quote unquote make it, and then they probably feel like they've been faking it the whole time, and then they get really insecure.
Yeah, and I think that's a super great point. So it's really also about when we and just I also want to say it's natural. Like I have imposter syndrome too. I think we all do. We all have self-doubt, and it's really natural when you start to move up in levels of competence. So it's natural when you don't know what you're doing to feel that way. But to feel that way when you do know what you're doing, when you have a series of successes or competences that breed confidence, that's when it's something to really look at and to shift. And I know we're going to talk about shifting that. But so I just want to make the difference between the naturalness of self-doubt. And by the way, one of my dear friends who was in med school had a nervous breakdown and a crisis of self-doubt. And he, at that point, then I don't remember if he dropped out of med school. I mean, he did get through med school, but he then went on to write one of the very first books on evidence-based medicine that is now standard in the medical industry. And then he went on to start teaching about self-doubt in corporations like Pfizer, really giant drug corporations. It was his most popular class. So everyone wanted to know, how do I overcome this self-doubt? Yeah.
Yeah. So like, where does this even begin? Right? Like, how widespread is it? How, what, and we can get as like psychologically deep as we can here, but because like this sort of thing has to start somewhere. And these feelings of self-doubt, self-hate that you talk about, like, where does it start? How many people would you estimate even deal with this?
I was looking up all of these statistics, John, and it's just mind-boggling because some are as high as 90% for both men and women. So it's a little more evident in women, and I'll tell you why. Because men, when they have it, they go forward anyway. They take action anyway, and women are held back by it. So it's up to 90% for women. It's typically around the main statistic by KPMG is 75%. So that's a lot. So it's anywhere from being insecure in a meeting, or if you are a lawyer, like entering the courtroom, right? Like entering a courtroom or working with a client, where you start to think about like, oh my God, I'm not really prepared for this, or I'm not really as good as I think I am. Or there's the compare and despair, which is like, especially like if you're in a courtroom, I'm not as good as the other attorney or the other lawyer who's making the presentation, and oh my God, I'm going to lose this case. When you start to get into that swirl, that's part of the downfall, or can be really crippling in those kind of situations. And that's where you really want to start to develop your mental mastery. I really don't like the term mental toughness, because I don't think it's about being tough. I think it's about the mental and muscle it's mastering yourself. And I think that's really key.
Yeah. And to your point about, the percentage being lower in men, I mean, just obviously speaking from experience, I know how we think. I wonder if a lot of that is men not being willing to admit it, and just kind of being very prideful and just kind of doubling down and sticking their foot in the ground, and just, powering through it, and not being willing to be vulnerable and admit that, hey, I do have a little bit of doubts about this.
Yeah, I was actually, an attorney had asked me to create a course for him. And part of it was a communication course for women. And I had this whole section on imposter syndrome. He didn't even know what it was. He's like,
Wow.
what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, no man is going to admit to that. And I said, oh yeah, I have men clients who are like super successful, multimillionaires, have several, robust businesses. So it doesn't matter how successful you are. I think it really does strike all of us, and men. And you're right about men, maybe not willing to admit it. They do admit it to me when we're working together, because I think it's really essential in starting to work with it. To admit it is really part of the awareness. And that is one of the top qualities of a leader. The number one top quality in successful leaders is self-awareness. And so I think it is great to have that awareness and then be able to express it, even if it's just in private. To me, you don't have to go posting it on social media.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, we talk a lot, obviously, we do marketing for law firms, some financial firms. And I think there could really be one big area where having that sort of imposter syndrome can hold you back, and maybe affect how you market yourself and market your firm. Because if you don't truly believe in your expertise and your abilities in your profession, how are you going to effectively market yourself? So what have you seen in that regard, in terms of how people have kind of maybe limited themselves, for lack of a better term, by imposter syndrome?
I think it's really when we're talking about setting your mindset and setting your deepest intentions, when we start, before when I work with a client, and before we ever approach doing any kind of media appearances, we really look deeply into three things. And that is, what's your big vision? How do you want to serve? That's number one. Number two is, what do you want for yourself? And we look at professionally, personally, physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, everything, because PR can open up this this whole thing. And I think your job can too, as a lawyer or someone in finance. We could, if we start to look at our job in a more holistic way, there's the term now, bring your whole self to work. I'm like, who else could you bring? Like, how can you not bring your whole self to work? But
Right.
it's a thing now, right? So you do bring your whole self to work, whether you know it or not. It's seen on, and that's one of the things that was so crazy for me in Aikido, is you can't hide anything because we see it in your body. And we think that we're good hiders, but we're not. People
Mhm.
always, and that's part of the fear. And then the third thing is, what do you want your audience to do? What action do you want them to take? And we look at all of that. So the deeper question, the biggest and deepest question I think we can ask ourselves is, what is mine to do with the gifts that I have?
Mm.
And if we can come back to that, no matter what, and that's a question to be asking yourself every single day. That's outside of a presentation, or working with a client, or if you're in a courtroom, or whatever iteration that may be, right? And really think about, what with the gifts that I have, versus we're in a culture where it's compare and despair,
Mm.
or fake. It's the fake. It's we're looking at social media, so we're looking at fake vulnerability, which is one of my, I'm so vulnerable. Like, never say that, please. Like, never ever say that. Just be vulnerable, or
Yeah.
be caring, or but don't announce that's what you're doing, right? And so there's a lot of fakery going on, and then there's a lot of fakery and filters, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that we have to continually remind ourselves. I remember Carl Jung said, one of the hardest things to do is to accept yourself fully. And I think
Mm.
that's really true, particularly in our culture today. So it takes work to continue to accept yourself fully for who you are and the gifts that you have. And I think that is a daily practice, and that there are practices and techniques that we do to build that mental and muscle memory, through breath work, through meditation. So when you're on the spot and it happens, you can mind your mind.
Mhm.
Take the breath when you have the thought, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, or that person's better than I am in one way, shape, or form. To take that breath, let it go, and then either in the moment think, like, what's great about this person, or remind yourself, like, what am I here to do? Like, what am I going to say that will be valuable to the people that are before me? Or, whether it's a meeting, a presentation, a TED Talk, whatever that is. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I we talk a lot about, the value of being authentic, being vulnerable. Like, it's okay. You don't have to know everything. It's really just about showing your strength, showing the value that you can bring. And I don't think anyone out there is reasonably expecting someone that they work with to know everything, or to be the absolute very top at of what they do.
No, and I think it's really wonderful to be able to say that, to say, I don't know, and I'll find out,
Mhm.
that
Yes.
is, and I'll find out, because I will find out for you.
Mhm.
It's more that kind of confidence in yourself that you'll, I was, what I loved about, it's not about like what you have right now or what you don't have. It's about the ability to get to where you want to go. Like, it's really that ability to know that you can learn what you need to learn. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really big difference. To, you might not be there yet, where none of us are in
Yeah.
any kind of experience, but to have the confidence in yourself, not that you can do it, but the confidence that you know that you have the capacity to start to learn whatever it is you know that you want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and part of that comes from experience. And so, maybe some of the older listeners may feel like they don't, they've I don't want to say gotten past that, because I don't, that almost sounds like they've fixed the problem, and I don't know that that's necessarily the case. But I mean, to your point, I mean, one of the best things that I feel like I learned pretty early on was to just be honest and be like, if someone asked me a question, just be like, I don't have that answer for you right now, but I'm going to go get it and I will get back to you. And I felt like that earned me a little bit more respect, and people, and because people are going to be a little bit more forgiving. Like, they're not going to be inconvenienced if you don't have all the answers right away.
No, not at all. And to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, that's absolutely fascinating. I will think about it, or
Mhm.
I'm going to explore that, with you. Let's see what we come up with, make it a collaborative effort. There's all kinds of ways to deal with that, but I don't think it has to be that we naturally go toward, oh my God, I should know everything and I don't know this one thing, and therefore I'm a failure. Right.
Right.
So that's the managing the mind part. It's like, oh, that's fascinating. I'm going to find that out for you or for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked up at the beginning about your background in martial arts, and you hinted a little bit at how that really helped you in sort of this kind of arena, not necessarily just with imposter syndrome, but just being able to carve your path and everything that you do. Talk a little bit more about, especially for people who aren't as familiar. I know I'm not as familiar with the martial arts world. How do those two areas connect?
So I do what's called Aikido, which is Japanese martial arts. And really, the main premise of that is turning your lead into gold. So anything that needs to be transformed within you to be constantly polishing your spirit. And it's the same thing when I do media training with my clients, or whatever they're. It's really polishing our spirit. It's whatever comes up, because triggers are going to come up. It's just natural. So we expect it. So we often go through worst case scenarios first, like what are your biggest fears. We go through those. Sometimes clients want to do it first
Mhm.
because it's so especially with imposter syndrome, we're not feeling confident. It's like, let's go to the core of what that is. But also those triggers can come up surprise. So that's why we want to do actual role play. And
Mhm.
just like, when my best friend who is first a public defender and then a commissioner, and now he's a judge, we would sometimes, I mean, he's really super masterful and brilliant, but when he was first starting, we did role playing, like, oh my God, my client started screaming he was going to kill me or whatever, like, and he even did death row cases. So we did like actual role play, like for his court appearances, but also
Yeah.
handling his clients, because there were some super challenging clients, particularly as a public defender, people who didn't even want to see him. He's African American Black, and some people were like, uh, you know, got down on him like he wasn't Black enough, or whatever that was, like for whatever the particular trigger was for
Yeah.
that person. So we went through those kind of role plays. So in Aikido, what happens is a lot of things come up and are visible in our bodies right away. So before we ever even step onto the mat, we we expand in every direction, top and our energy. So this is an imaginative exercise, but top to bottom, side to side, back to back, everywhere. So if you expand yourself, this is also a yogic practice, just
Mm.
expand yourself like you're a body of light. Boom. And you can so much feel it. So when you start to
Mhm.
get command of your energy in that way before you walk into a room, before you meet a client, um, to be practicing that all the time, that you
Yeah.
expand in every direction. So then you're already in like a higher state, even with, and you can still do this when you're fearful too. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're still afraid, because I was always afraid on the Aikido floor. The sensei or the teacher would explain something, and I would go like, sometimes I would just, my mind would go blank, and I'm like, this is too hard. I want to run away. I need to go to the bathroom. I was just like, because it was so scary,
Yeah.
because we're throwing each other backwards and forwards. And so, I would take that breath, feel my feet on the floor, expand my energy. So that's one of the things that we do. The other thing that we do is connect deeply with the person. So while we want to take the person's center and throw them, we want to take them off balance. What we want to do first is connect deeply. So heart to heart, head to head. And you can do this when you're in a media appearance. Just you can, whatever the imaginative practice is for you, you can come up with something that works for you, but you can imagine a light or a connective rod or whatever that is, that you're just connecting with the host and then connecting with the audience, whoever that is. So that's an
Mm.
imaginary thing, but that's what we do first before we actually touch. And then when you touch the person, then you can feel where they are. And then that's the moment where we want to take their center and take them off balance. So it's the same thing in a media appearance or whatever, you're taking someone in the direction, you're connecting with them, taking them in the direction that they think they want to go, which is with you. And then you subtly take them off the course, which is the course that you want them to go on. So that's the way we would redirect a question to, or something that you don't know. So if somebody did say like a question that you don't know, and you said, oh, I don't know, for media training, we say, I don't know about that. And what I do know is, and then you move into the conversation that you want to have. So you can always use that, even with someone that, when you say, I don't know, I'm going to find out about that. And then you move into the conversation. And
that's really good, because you can still walk away from that giving them some sort of value, even if at upfront you didn't have anything to offer initially, you can still give them something in the end. What then, other than the martial arts kind of stuff, I mean, what sort of tips or exercises do you do with people that I guess, again, for lack of a better term, kind of build that confidence, and kind of get rid of that imposter syndrome, to make them, really see like they truly are, at the level of respect and expertise that, a lot of people probably already perceive them as.
So one of the things we talked about is the worst case scenarios. So for example, I was working with a CEO of a very large medical device company, and there was one guy who really got under his skin. And so what we did is we role played that situation. He was going out for the next round funding. And so one of the things that we did two things. We wanted to play that out, like I would play the actual person that gets under your skin, so you can feel what it feels like in your body when you get the trigger. It was like, oh, I feel it in my gut, or my head hurts, or my throat constricts, whatever that is. So you actually want to physically go through it to find out what happens in your body and what happens in your mind. And then once we notice that, we're like, oh, my throat is constricted. Then you can start to practice, well, what do I do? So it's about taking the in breath, taking it out, letting it go, expanding. So those mental exercises. And then, so we practice that, but then we also practice, and this is for media training, for practicing for a media appearance as well, is you want to have set your key messaging ready, and then anticipate any kind of opposition to that, or any kind of thing. So that's part of the practice and the formulation. And then, so part of it is when you're caught off guard to, so you might, you have a second of like that. And so the first thing to do is to breathe. And this is something we forget first, but the autonomic nervous system. So to practice, what we practice off camera is slower breathing, meaning breathing in for 4, hold for 4, and then breathing out for 7 or 6, whatever. There's a longer out breath, because that automatically calms your vagus nerve and your nervous system. So that's something that you can always do before something that's nerve-wracking. But it's best if you start to practice that, and you can do it while you're walking, you can do it while you're driving. I was driving to the city to meet my BFF, because he lives in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And so I was just practicing breathing in the car. And I also recommend you practice speaking in the car, but paying attention, paying attention. But if you can, just practice talking when you're otherwise occupied, and breathing when you're otherwise occupied. And that is, I mean, somebody said, when you control your breath, you control the universe, you control the world. So I think that's really key. It sounds so simple, but that's what any sport, it's about controlling the breath. It's same in Aikido, where you're doing the out breath and you're doing the throw at the same time. That breathing is so important. So that's one thing. Do you want me to go on for some other things?
Well,
too?
I do have a question, because, I especially about the role play stuff, because I find myself doing this sort of thing, but not with another person. Like I will kind of,
you can't do it in your mind. No.
Okay. I was wondering if that's what you would say.
No, absolutely not. You need to do it with another person and practicing. And here's what happened. So one of my clients, we were doing, she's got an incredible background. She's managed people in D&I, people of all ages and ethnicities and stuff. So she's super, super skilled, and she's a fantastic speaker. And she did have a crisis of confidence. And I was like, and sometimes so it happens to the people who are most talented. And so we started practicing this. And one of the things that we practiced was we were practicing a situation where someone was like more arrogant or a little nasty, a little aggressive, and things like that in a particularly challenging media appearance thing. And so I played that person, and she, who's so skilled, got her hackles up and started sort of being a little snipey at me. And she said, when we were done, she says, like, all I could think of you is you were an a-hole man. Like, she forgot I was a and she goes, you're an a-hole, arrogant white man, coming at me like that. And that's what we want to experience. Like, she was super experienced, but she had to get that experience. And then we went through that. She's like, I know I need to work on that inside myself because that got me. And that's the thing about playing it in real life, because we don't know what we're going to do. And there's research around this too. We don't know. We think we're going to do this, and then when we're in the actual situation, we're doing something completely different. That's why you need to actually practice it at the real situation.
Yeah, and to me, the thing that just dawned on me there is if you have someone else and going through that exercise with someone else, you don't have full control over how that conversation goes. Like, if you're just doing it in your
mind,
head,
if you have a control, right?
Like,
and then somebody comes up with, exactly. And you can do it perfectly in your mind.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh yeah, you can. And so it was no criticism of you, by the way, because everybody wants to do that. Oh, why do I need to practice? When I first started training classes, I have a course called the Zen of Fame, Your Genius Gone Viral. And people, we were in a group, and when I asked for volunteers to practice, nobody wanted to step up into the spotlight. I'm like, this is what this course is about. Like, it was so scary. And then it was really about, people are like, I'm practicing it in my mind. They said exactly what you said. And I'm like, no, well, now practice it with me in a situation like this. And it's like, you don't know how you're going to respond. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's and at least in my experience, it's like, oh, I didn't prepare for them to say that thing. Now I'm back to square one. And exactly.
So we work on also those. So what do you say when you're caught? So that I shared with you one thing. I don't know about that, and what I do know is, and you can, and there's another, by time question, which is, oh, that's a wonderful something to think about. And I will think about it, but I won't answer it now. I mean, you can use humor, you can use a pattern interrupt. So pattern interrupt is anything that's a little louder or softer. So we use our voice tone. So like, oh my God, so it just sort of shifts the things in a moment. So we work on pattern interrupts with your voice, with your pause, with your pitch, with your tempo, with what you're saying, to be able to control a conversation. Or a situation. Right.
Yeah. And as you keep going through some of these tips, the one kind of pattern that I'm picking up on is that it's really all about how much control you can maintain in kind of a given interaction. And so obviously the more control you have over it, the more confident that you will naturally be. Am I kind of on the right track with that?
It's control over yourself, not the situation.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the self-mastery, because you're always going to be put in situations where you've never experienced before. That's just the nature of life.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, so even though I'm a martial artist, I haven't had a street fight, right? Like, and it's totally different on the mat. And there were these two guys, fighting on the sidewalk, and one guy was like hitting the other guy, and I just pulled up in my car and I started screaming at them, and I just said, stop it, you both need to stop it, and I just, so I'm like shaking in my car, but I rolled down my window and I'm so, I'm like, stop it, just stop it. I was pulling up to the meter, and you both need to just cut it out right now. And that was enough of a pattern enough for them to, and one came at my window, but he did this. I said, I don't care what he did. Stop hitting each other. I said, just start having a conversation, because they were friends, actually,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it turned out they were friends, and I'm like, okay, let's all just take a deep breath. And I was still in my car, actually. I'd like to just take a deep breath, and let's talk about, yes, someone, you perceived he did a wrong, and he may have, and it may not have been the right thing, but let's just take a breath, take a pause, and talk it out, So you just don't know, like, did I want to butt into a dangerous situation like that? No, but that was like my instinct in just like preserving humanity, two people hurting each other. Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, so like, I know I've learned a couple of things through this, and the big thing is I need to stop having conversations in the shower with myself because they're not going to be fruitful. But
have it loud. Like if you're doing it in the shower, speak it out loud.
Oh,
you can still talk it out loud. Yeah, it's still more helpful to actually get it out loud if you're in the shower.
For
but
sure.
Have something in the shower with you if you have a whatever.
That's a good excuse to get my wife involved.
Lure someone in. Yes.
Awesome. Yes, love that. So, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about your courses and programs, and all the things that you do?
So they can go to prsecrets.com, like public relations secrets, PRSECRETS.com. And I have lots of free videos. I have free special reports that you can download. So you can sorry, that's my cat Lucky. Here you can hear him.
I thought I heard something. Yeah.
Yeah,
always good to have animals that come in.
Here. And so I'm not sure which one would be the most helpful for your audience, but I do have one that pops up right away on the 100-word email to get the media to call you. And also one that is particularly useful if you're going to be doing podcasts or any kind of media, which is your signature story, which everyone needs your origin story, why you do what you do, because it's the first question that typically you're going to be asked in any media interview. Why do you do what you do? Why did you write your book? Why did you start your business? And that's called at prsecrets.com/SIGPOD, SIGPOD, like signature story podcast. So that might be useful to your audience too.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about, especially with the marketing side and the branding side, is just being able to have that story and create that emotional connection with people, because it does go so much farther.
And that's templated. I have 5 templates. They're not the only ones, but they're the 5 major ones, and fill in the blank. So it's super easy. You can do it in less than 5 minutes, all of your people. So it might be a great place to start. And then you can help them hone it and, expand on it and hone it. But it gets all the basics right in there, like ASAP. Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. So one final question for you before we wrap up here. It's one that I try to ask everybody that comes on the show. I don't think I've been 100% perfect with it, but what, if you had one final piece of advice,
like, I think it's iteration. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I found that because kind of the way I record is I might go several weeks without recording an episode, and then the first couple getting back into it, it's just I got to reform all those same habits. And so gotten into a good rhythm now. So if you had one final piece of advice for our audience, what would it be?
Stop glorifying and focusing on the imposter syndrome. Instead, focus on really, what are you here to give? And that can be in every single situation, asking what can I give that no one else can? But also I really like to think about what's the highest good for all involved, to be able, and it's only about controlling yourself in the situation. I think that's something to remember as well, not trying to control or manipulate others, but how can I master myself to continue to become the person that I want to be, and to really look at that on a daily. Sometimes one person recommends looking at that 3 times a day. Am I becoming the person who I want to be? Let me, and to review that. You can do a review at the end of the day. I mean, this is a beautiful practice to do with children too. What made you happy today? What did you do? What great good did you do for others? I think it's a great practice for our children too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's just a good reminder that, life is a lot about constant growth. You're not going to really ever, you're not going to ever reach the end, right? You're not going to
until the end, until you're
exactly. Yeah. So love that. Yeah. And I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you all out there for continuing to listen, rate, and review wherever you're consuming the show. And that's it. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.